The world's most ignored war can be found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But don't worry if you haven't heard about it because its name isn't very helpful. What we call the Democratic Republic of the Congo used to be called Zaire, and before that it was called the Belgian Congo. Why? Well, Belgium used to rule this territory, exploiting its people and resources until they were forced to let the Congo go in 1960. But that didn't mean Belgium was done with the Congo, because they made sure to keep controlling this part of the country by pretending to be worried about their citizens. And now in 2022, the Congo is still trying to escape the mess that Belgium left behind. Today's video will explain why there is a war happening in the Congo and why it has been called the world's most ignored war. And if you enjoy this video, please hit that like button so I can keep making them. Now let's go to the Congo. There are hundreds of armed groups fighting for land and resources in the Congo, which makes it one of the most complex conflicts in the world. When you look at this map, it may seem that the red areas are pretty static. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. This area controlled by the Red Tabara and Raya-Mutomboki militia groups changes hands almost daily. That's because these groups are constantly shifting alliances and switching territories. Just look at this map from 2014. It looks totally different than the one from today, right? This is how the region has looked since 1996, when the Congo's second deadliest war started. This war began after the Rwandan genocide, where Hutu extremists fled to the Congo. And if you don't know what the Rwandan genocide was, you should definitely check out my video explaining it. Anyway, the Congolese people were fed up with the Tutsi rebels and the Hutus supporting them, so they formed their own militias to fight against them. At first, the two sides fought each other directly, but then the Hutus realized they had made a big mistake. They were outnumbered and outgunned by the Congolese and Tutsi alliance. So the Hutus started doing something much smarter. They switched sides and joined the Congolese in fighting against the Tutsis. After years of fighting, the Tutsis lost and fled to Uganda. Meanwhile, the Hutus were able to claim victory alongside the Congolese and take control of the eastern part of the country. But soon enough, the Hutus did what they do best: betray the Congolese. In 2008, the Hutu rebel group known as the National Congress for the Defense of the People marched towards the capital and attempted to overthrow the government. The fighting was extremely brutal. Women were raped, villages were burned down, and thousands upon thousands of people lost their lives. But in 2009, a peace deal was finally reached. Both the Hutu and Tutsi rebel groups would lay down their arms and turn themselves over to the National Army. In exchange, the government promised to integrate them into the army and give them amnesty for all crimes committed during the war. Now this peace deal sounded great at first. After all, everyone was tired of fighting and wanted the bloodshed to end. But the problem was that the government wasn't strong enough to control the country. You see, just a few years earlier, the Congo had emerged victorious from a massive war that had killed millions. It was a huge effort just to bring the country back together. And on top of that, they had to deal with an illegal election that was supposed to bring democracy to the country. So although the government desperately wanted peace, they weren't able to disarm and reintegrate the militias like they had promised. Instead, they gave the militias weapons and let them keep pillaging the countryside. Soon enough, the peace deal fell apart. In 2011, a new rebellion broke out led by former general who felt that his own army was undoing enough to protect civilians in the east. He claimed that the government was unintegrating the militias like they had promised, and that entire regions were being handed over to the militias to be plundered. And he was right. The government had completely lost control over the eastern part of the country. Armed groups were committing horrible atrocities, and no one was stopping them. So General Bosco's rebellion was actually welcomed by many people in the Congo. However, the government obviously wasn't happy about another war breaking out, so they tried everything they could to stop it. At first, they offered General Bosco a deal of his own. They promised to make him defense minister and give him the rank of general if he laid down his arms. But General Bosco refused and instead continued his march towards the capital. The government responded by starting a manhunt for him. The National Army was sent to capture or kill him. Now, if you think that this must have ended General Bosco's rebellion, you're wrong. It actually did quite the opposite. The fact that the government was trying to hunt him down proved that they were unsincere about the peace process, and this gave the other rebel leaders an excuse to start their own rebellions. By 2012, the entire east of the country had risen in arms. General Bosco's plan was to keep marching west and liberate the Congo from the corrupt government. As he moved his troops, two new rebel groups formed in the east. One of them was called the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, and the other was called the Sioux. Together, they created a defensive wall around the east to prevent the National Army from chasing after the rebels. Soon enough, the National Army stopped pursuing General Bosco. They were simply too weak to fight another war. So once again, the Congo found itself in a stalemate. The country was split between the corrupt government in the west and the rebel forces in the east. And just like last time, the international community got involved. The United Nations and the African Union demanded that the government negotiate a peace deal with the rebels. And once again, the rebels agreed. In 2013, the government signed a peace deal with the MLC and the Souza. They promised the rebels political positions in the government and integration into the national army. But even though this peace deal seemed to work at first, it soon started to fall apart. The government wasn't holding up their end of the bargain. The new rebel groups that had emerged after General Bosco's death were undisarmed and integrated into the national army. Instead, they were given land and resources to exploit. Once again, rebel groups started shifting alliances, and the country descended into chaos. And when this happened, two of the smaller rebel groups, the Raya Mutomboki and the Red Tabara, decided to flee to Rwanda. There they asked the Rwandan army for help to fight against the Congolese army. And if you remember from the beginning of the video, this is what led to the current situation where the Red Tabara and Raya Mutomboki control parts of the eastern Congo. Now you might be wondering, why didn't Rwanda immediately jump at the chance to invade the Congo? Well, it's not that simple. You see, Rwanda and the Congo have a complicated history. Back in 1996, the Rwandan army invaded the Congo to stop the Hutu extremists from attacking them. Then in 1998, the Congo fought back against the Rwandans, and that's what led to the second deadliest war in the Congo's history. And here's the thing, that war was so brutal that both countries wanted to forget it ever happened. For the next 20 years, Rwanda and the Congo kept things peaceful. They focused on growing their economies and developing their countries. However, when the fighting started again in 2012, Rwanda had to choose a side. Even though they didn't want to pick a side, they couldn't just sit back while their enemy was getting attacked. So they decided to support the Tutsi rebel groups that were fighting against the government. But this support never turned into a full invasion. Even today, Rwanda only supports a few rebel groups, the ones that are close to their border. They don't want to get drawn deeper into the Congo, because then they might end up fighting against the Rwandan-backed rebels. It would be a nightmare scenario. So even though Rwanda is technically helping the Red Tabara and the Raya Mutomboki, they aren't doing it openly. They fear that if they admit it, the other rebel groups will turn against them and attack the border. Now all of this might sound confusing, but here's a simple way to think about it. The Congo is the world's most ignored war because there are too many factions fighting each other. Each faction has a slightly different goal. Some of them want independence, others want more autonomy, and yet others just want revenge. On top of that, the government that's supposed to stop all this fighting is extremely weak. Since the Congo gained independence in 1960, they've experienced coups, assassinations, rebellions, and civil wars. The country has never really had a chance to grow in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. And this is what makes the Congo such a breeding ground for rebel groups. People have no faith in the government and believe that violence is the only way to achieve their goals. The fighting has become so ingrained in the culture that it seems impossible to stop. And if you think this is bad, things could get much worse. The Congo is sitting on a gold mine, literally. They have the world's largest gold reserve, as well as huge deposits of diamonds, cobalt, and copper. As the demand for these resources grows, so will the fighting because every armed group wants to control them. The Congo is a ticking time bomb. If you want to better understand global politics, follow for more content.